course.
I've seen also that the semantics across machine learning and AI and going into policy making around AI really crisscrosses and can cause misunderstandings when we're trying to work across disciplines. I co-organized the AI for Social Good workshop for NeurIPS. NeurIPS is the biggest conference on AI. They sold 8,000 tickets in 12 minutes, like going to a rock concert for AI scientists. And I had 3 computer scientists on my panel and 1 policy expert on AI. And I said, okay, so this is really a dumb question when we're preparing. Is okay, if I say implementation of AI, is this what do you think it means? Well, of course, my 3 computer scientists think, well, you've developed a system and you're now implementing the system, into nitty-gritty, and then policies and implementing AI means, of course, it means deploying into society, kind of rules you apply to programs. Okay, so that's obvious to you, that's obvious to you. Okay, so if I say social implementation, does that make it clearer? Still no, because for the computer scientists, the social deployment of a technical system did not refer for them to the laws and programs and policies that we develop. So yes, as we go into the age of AI and work in multidisciplinary teams, those kind of like glossaries are becoming more needed.
I think there will always be terms. Okay, they're never going to go away, and the terms all live within particular communities, right? So there are terms in art theory that technologists will never understand. There are terms that technologists use that artists will never understand. So the only really way out of this whole terminology mystification process or space that we will continuously find ourselves in is to figure out a way to not be embarrassed that we don't know the terms. So perhaps it actually just requires the ability to just go, I don't actually know that term, can you explain it to me? Or, and not adopt the attitude that just because you don't know the term means that somehow your influence or your thoughts or insights regarding the broader subject area are less important. And I think that if there's one thing that we can take in as an art sector is that we know a lot of terms other people don't know. And we love their input, so why would we assume that in those spaces where the terms might not be familiar to us, that those people might not want our input too?
Great. It does relate to a question that the 3 of us talked about briefly on Friday when we were preparing for this, and that is how do we convene conversations? And this is very much about this gathering today. So could we talk a little bit perhaps about certainly how do you build representation inside conferences, but also inside decision-making teams?
Maybe I'll start within the conferences because that's kind of what I'm in this week really deeply. Bringing the AI sector together with the social sector was a conscious decision. There's 5% women at the Mila AI Research Center, and there's still 60, not still because it's not a bad thing, but there are 67% of women who are in the broader definition of what social sector is, including supportive roles and administrative roles. So by bringing the social sector together with the AI sector in collaborative environments, whether they be conferences or institutions like USC, the example I gave earlier, I think we create collaborative teams that at least are gender balanced. And then the rest is really like outreach work, making people feel welcome, calling them, making sure they're there. But maybe just 2 years ago when I started the AI Social Mission Conference, I could not, probably just because of my own ignorance, but I was not very connected with the Indigenous community in Canada. Akulina Kano, who's here, helped me because she's been she's ex-CEO of the Manitoba Art Council, and NBC Art Council. She was very active, so she gave me little pointers. I had some friends who helped me reach out. But I mean, there's an active effort and time that needs to be spent. And as you say, Anna, it's the open dialogue, not being afraid to ask questions, saying, how should I, address this, right? Or
well, I think part of the how to convene is both about the diversity of the participants of such a meeting on the one hand, but the other thing that's equally important is the positioning of the participants. So positioning actually has a massive critical role to play in how such convening takes place. And in many ways, co-creation has a problem with positioning sometimes, okay? Because whenever you think about co-creative processes, there's someone who knows how it works, there's participants who know less, and then participants who know more, or something like, there's this kind of implicit mapping in a co-creative process sometimes that can take place, where the positioning of the participants aren't explicitly talked about, and therefore you can't interrogate that. And so I think it behooves facilitators and conveners to be as explicit about the positioning of the participants as possible, because it's not to say that all hierarchical positioning is bad. There are times when it's actually quite important to have very specific roles articulated, but that has to be made transparent so that any effort at interrogating that is available to the participants.
It's a really critical point. One of the things that I think is really interesting about the notion of bias is that it is somehow reserved for people who are standing outside the power systems. And so understanding how we can reveal our own positionality, but then also lift up positions and positionality for people in the room who are traditionally marginalized or underserved, or who aren't given decision-making power in a space, and do it in a real, authentic way, and do it on a kind of a group by group. One of the things that I think is interesting in your experience with the Film Center, for example, is how you incubate, how you bring people together as groups, and then how you move them along.
Well, yeah, we've tried different models over the years. So the very first model we used was actually incubation as a, terrible terminology, my apologies, but incubation as a petri dish. So our very first program that began in '97 was essentially an experiment in collaborative decision-making by bringing together diverse, participants from diverse disciplines. We did not have any kind of requirements of what the disciplines are. You could be a filmmaker, an artist, a technologist, a business person, etc. And then these diverse groups were essentially forced to create teams. And then they had to come up with the building of a project together. So in that kind of model, that's really sort of an emergent model where we have zero idea exactly what will emerge. And we tried different ways in which to facilitate a model like that. Everything from, providing the provision of organizational development tools, leadership tools, to psychological assessment tools, to all sorts of different things. And I could go on and on about what worked and what didn't work. All the way to now, which is much more hands-off, where we're more prescriptive on our requirements, and then we provide support and investment dollars to people that we incubate, which is the more traditional form of incubation. So it's interesting to see that difference between talent and team incubation all the way to kind of startup incubation and the differences.
I would like to maybe add to what you're talking about. When we talk about diversity, I like to focus a lot on socioeconomic diversity as well, the inclusion of only 15% of science graduates come from a blue-collar background. So if we're trying to get diversity into AI, it also includes getting other socioeconomic communities on board, community, or I don't know what the proper term there is, but From a very personal note, I grew up on welfare and I sort of became a lawyer, so I always go back to that background. I think what my mother had that maybe some of the other parents around in my community didn't have was education and the chance to travel and being bilingual. So I grew up with the desire to leave and to go study and travel. But I'm always kept that sensitivity to that type of inclusion as well. And I think AI ethics is a very academic word. AI is intimidating. I like to bring AI ethics down to the ground to very proactive, practical questions. Might be the lawyer in me as well, it's very practical, but I think language, we just go back to language again and true effort. The conference ends, the AI Social Mission one, with discussion groups, and as I mentioned, 25% come from the community organizations, and they might be sitting with some triple postdoc in AI from Mila. So how do you keep, as we were talking about the conversation, and there's many choices in the design of the questions and the event and from the name tags, like there's always attention to detail in every little thing. And I wanted to say to Archival and DASSAN19 that you did an amazing job.
Great, and it does raise one of the other questions that came from the audience around, thinking about this particular sector and thinking about how diverse the sector is, not just by genre and about the way that people kind of work with one another, but even those financial structures and the funding models and the way in which the social impact is deployed in one way, or they're all very diverse. How do you build a kind of nuanced and collective voice in that kind of a space?
Artist power.
Yeah, artist power. Yeah.
Film.
Artist power.
Film was great.
Well, film and digital can also demographically suffer from some of those same issues. So a lot of people who come into that business come from very wealthy environments, and it's still a case that internships, etc., are a route in, and unless you have money, you cannot do an unpaid internship. So it's tricky.
Well, I don't know, we'll know by the end of the month, but we have 2 grant applications in, one with the Canadian Art Council, one with the federal government with that Social Innovation Fund to bring AI Social Mission pan-Canadian. We look forward to collaborating with the organizations who are here in the room, with ArtsCon, and we really need to bring that conversation across Canada and internationally. We also have international collaborators. So I really strongly believe that it's easier to build collaboration among civil society organizations because basically we all are striving for the same thing. We're all striving for human dignity, sustainable development goals, human rights. See, that's what CSOs do, and that's I believe there's potential. It'll be easier actually to reach consensus on ethical frameworks around AI if we go through CSOs and not the other way around, where there's a lot of competition for even copywriting standards on AI ethics at this point.
Well, it's interesting because one of the questions that just sort of popped up, and there's been a couple of variations on this, is how can arts organizations and CSOs participate in these kinds of discussions when resources are so scarce on the ground, right? And certainly one of the obvious answers is it needs to be supported, and that means bringing more resources in to the organizations, but also through the organizations.
I think we need to start thinking like maybe I'm being too extreme, so I apologize. But I do think we need to start thinking in similar terms as a climate emergency. Okay, so I think we are in a kind of societal emergency right now, and it includes climate. It includes issues of social cohesion and inequality. It includes technological determinism. It includes attention paid to, people's lives, right? And so this question of how do we make time becomes really a question of, can we afford not to make time? So if you think about it in those terms of that we are in this kind of emergency situation, then the notion of needing to make the time to do this, and I understand how difficult it is for me to require this of underserved organizations and smaller organizations and highly busy people, but that is where we're at today, is my belief, and I think it's the same moment that perhaps the environmental movement was in 20 years ago, where they were already kind of claiming climate emergency at that point. And then no one listened until the IPCC then said, actually it is a fucking climate emergency. And so now I think we're in a similar situation where there's a bunch of people, and technologists are some of them. I think of myself as a digital media practitioner throughout my entire career. I believe deeply in the role that technology can play in bettering our lives. However, we are in an emergency situation, and there's a lot of people saying that we need to start to pay attention. And I don't know whether we can wait 20 years for us to listen.
No, I totally agree. We are in a state of emergency. Data is your power. Data is not just oil. Data is the pillar of democracy. Data is what you have, what you own. I really started going to be missing Frédéric's talk on the Capacoa project. I'm extremely looking forward to knowing more about all the details and see how that develops. The concept of data co-ops started in the industry in the States. There were companies who said, hey, listen, you're a car company, you're a car company, we're all car companies, let's develop a data co-op so we have control over our data. We need to do the same thing in the art community, in the civil society organization community, and I'd be very mindful about who you associate with when you do develop data co-ops. You want data commons that are for you, by your citizens, for your community. I'm seeing AI commons being developed with private industry. Well, what they're going to do, take the NGO's data, use it, monetize it, and re-spit it out the other end for profit? Be mindful about who you associate with when you develop data commons, but do go ahead and develop data commons. Create data co-ops that benefit you and the community around you.
And I think just to add to that, there's no way a single organization can do this by themselves, right? So this is actually why these convening summits are very important, because it requires the large parts of the sector collaborating with each other to be able to create the levers, leverage points, to be able to force the powers that be to change. And so whether that's the government, whether that's the private sector, whether that's larger organizations sometimes even, right? So I think collective power can be very, very effective and impactful, but it requires everyone collaborating.
The digital art community is still very strong and predominantly male dominated industry. There's not a lot of women in the digital art. The second call for proposal was organized by my organizations, and we purposefully opened up to all forms of art. You're in craft and traditional art, you still have a voice on AIs. I think it really is extremely important to open the valves, and we had more women than men applying. We had a high number of participants, so it's sometimes choosing how you design your call for projects.
Any final words from mine?
Arts has the power, and it is a state of emergency. I said it well.
Don't panic.
No, it's the age of collaboration, right? I mean, yes, that's extremely important. Across Canada, Quebec, Ontario, BC, Saskatchewan and everywhere. We just really need to work together and internationally as well.
Great, thank you everybody.